Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be looking at making scratching types of effects like this one. That's one version we're going to be looking at. Actually has two different samples going. One's responsible for the scratching, the other one's the loop. It could be the same as the loop, but that's just one benefit to doing it this way. So we're going to be looking at this particular technique, and then the second technique we'll be looking at is using one sample to do it all. And I'm not looping here. Stuff like that. So this is just sort of like a crazy thing. You could do slower thing, a faster thing. We'll talk about getting like some of the different rhythms you can do. And I'm using drum loops for all of this, but you could of course use any material that you want. And then finally, the third one involves actually slicing up a sample into a bunch of parts. And then we are going to mess with this. And this is really different way of doing it than the other two ways. So we're going to be looking at making effects similar to these. So if you liked what you heard here, then continue watching. So let's go ahead and start with just the basic setup first. And let's just understand the basics of what we're doing. So I'm going to go to my first loop here. We're going to go ahead, bring up a new track, and we're going to place down a note. So right now, C4 is playing. We get our loop. And I should start, I guess, by saying I do not know how scratching works. I watched a lot of videos of people scratching, and I watched a couple tutorials and tried to come up with a way to make effects that are somewhat similar to it. And that's what I was going after here. So, okay, we've got our drum loop going. Few basic commands you need to understand. So first up are the pitch commands. So you have a pitch up command and a pitch down command. Now, the numbers here are in 1/16 of semisecond. So one semitone, meaning a note, would be just the whole number right here. So we have 1 to F to work with. So F would be the highest. Technically, FF would be like the highest. And yeah, so that's how that works. So if we put an F here, we're going to pitch up a lot. If we put a 4, we don't pitch up as much. And if you want even more pitch up in a single line, you can actually put down 2 of these on the same line. You get really, really high. Something to note about the pitch up is it's going to make the playhead move faster. So if you're going forwards through your sample, it's going to go forwards faster. And if you're going backwards, it's going to go backwards faster. So besides just understanding that pitch up equates to going up, pitch up also equates to how far you can make that playhead move through the sample. So if we look at the sample, look at it go. This is just a champion. And if we were to go ahead and put in here a backwards command, we'll see it go backwards. And okay, so that's what's going on there. We'll get more into this because it's not entirely true. For example, if we have this sample and we have it so that the mode is in percussion mode, we've pitched it up an awful lot, but it's not moving faster. You want it in the re-pitch mode. So yeah, these modes look at it differently, and the percussion mode can be pretty cool, but we're going to stick with the re-pitch mode for the majority of this. Another thing to keep in mind is if you are using beat sync, it's going to change how this whole shebang works. So if you turn on beat sync to make it like line up, then when you change this value, specifically in intervals of times or times are divided by 2, like we made this 64, it's going to get a lot faster, or you could get like a lot slower. So something to be aware of. Also, if you use the re-pitch mode, it takes away the ability to write in different notes. See, they all sound the same. There's no difference in the tuning, and there are other modes to change this, but these are all things you have to consider, because if your sample's behaving weirdly, then that's stuff you have to know about. And so that's what we're gonna do there. So that's the pitch up. So the big takeaway with pitch up is you can pitch up more by adding additional notes here, and it correlates to how fast which will equal how far that playhead will move through the sample. So if you want some really crazy what sounds, you're going to need to, you might need to pump these values up. So if you put a U with 2 zeros, it repeats the last value in that column. So this is going to pitch it up, 15 semitones, and then this one's going to pitch it up another 15. So like really high. So it's kind of like this if we had a U here, but if we had a U here, there is no previous value, so this U will do nothing. Oh, it's doing something. Maybe it's because I typed a value there. I was under the impression that if we had a new column and we put a U here, yeah, oh, that's really fascinating. Interesting. So this, if you have typed a value, it will remember that value. I didn't even know that was a thing. I wonder if I should tell them about that. It's kind of a weird find. Wow. So, okay. Yeah. So if you put a U with a 0, 0, it will repeat the last value. Apparently it like has in memory. So keep that extra in mind. If you delete stuff, you want to define your value first. So if we put this at like 4, this will pitch it up 4, and then this will pitch it up 4. And the same thing holds true for down. So let's say that we put a down. This will repeat it. It'll pitch it down 4, and then we'll pitch it down even further 4 more. If we put this down like way down here. Notice it doesn't care if there's like stuff, like a gap, it'll remember it. Apparently it doesn't even care if there was nothing there. If there was a history, it'll remember it. And of course, if you put a U command, it will repeat this 4. So this U command will undo this D command. It will undo the drop. So let's put this a little further away so we have a chance to hear it. So this is going to, first we'll pitch it down, then we'll pitch it back up, which will put it back at the center, and then we will go back down. So on and so forth. So that is the way these commands work. Important to understand. Other commands we'll be using are the backwards and forwards commands. So if you type B00, it's going to reverse the sample. And if you type B01, it's going to put that sample going forwards again. Now, the sample ends here. This brings up an important point. On your sample, when you load one up, there's going to be a loop setting. If you don't have one, you see down here, it says loop. If you don't have this on, when it reaches the end of the sample, it just, that's the end of it. I've actually found that sometimes this could be a fun setting to have on or off. It'll create different rhythms. I really wish this was like automatable, or there was a hex command that directly correlated to this that I could turn on or off. And then that would be really, really cool, because then you could like toggle that effect. But right now, yeah, the loop command, right now it's static. And every time you load a new sample, this is something that I really wish there was like some sort of lock feature, because every time you click on a new sample, it will also reset this to off, which I really wish that wasn't a thing. I wish there was a way to lock these, or even have hex commands to select samples in a particular folder. Like, that would be so dang crazy. That sounds complicated though. Anyways, I digress. So if we set this to ping pong, it'll fix that. See how it continues to play, even though it reached the end of the sample. So on and so forth. So you're going to probably want to have this on. And this will bring up some interesting issues in the third method that we'll get to. So that's backwards and forwards. Finally, there is the slice command, S, or I'm not sure if it's the slice command technically, but it's S. And when you turn this on, it behaves differently if you've chopped a sample up. But for this particular case, when you have S on, you see down here, it's got like 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0. And if you don't see it, go to 0S effect and it will show you. So basically, when you put a sample in, it's going to divide it into a bunch of chunks. And then you can access these chunks here. And they're divided quite nicely so that I believe it's 255 because it's 0 indexed, if I recall. Don't murder me if it's 256. But what this basically means is intervals of 4 have a unique power. So 4, 8, and C are the values you're going to want to try out. So if, for example, if we put this at 1, what this is going to do is it's going to go over to the position 1, 0 right here. And so if we play this, we start right on a snare. If we want to move over to the halfway point between, 1 and 2, which we look at 1 and 2. So here's 1, here's 2. This halfway point, you know, musically, that's typically going to have something of importance. And if there's subdivisions even further, these halfway points will have things of importance. So if we come over here and make this an 8, right, halfway between 16, we're landing right there on that kick drum. And if we make this a 4, we'll be at the halfway point, which in this one, I believe is silence. Yeah. If there were hi-hats or something, typically they'll be there. And of course, a C, which will be on the other side of that. Also silence. Let me show you. See, we're picking up right here. Second half. So this is pretty handy. You'll see me pull out the slice command to find a nice entry point after some scratching. Notice over here, there is, well, this slice command is not being used anymore. But this one has a slice command. So while it's scratching, I want the drum beat to pick up partway through. And so the scratching stops. So here's like the scratching. And then it turns off because I might have set up some really weird pitch settings and I found it easier to just do my, you know, crazy scratching. And then over here is the drum loop and it's not playing anything. And then it picks up at a nice point after like the scratching would have taken place. So it's like picking up partway through the sample already. So that's what the S command is doing over there. And then finally, we have the C command. C command is another very useful command. You could use volume technically to do this. So there's like a volume row right here, this yellow column. But I like the C command because the C command sets a volume. So the first value is the volume. So right now this is like CF is like freaking play it super loud. And then like we get softer, like let's make it a 3. This is gonna be really soft. Super tiny. Notice there's a little click at the beginning. That's due to the second value. So the second value, I thought it would be instant, but it's pretty much instant. The second value is in charge of how many ticks until the volume change is applied. So let's say that we start off at, you know, CF0. So basically don't wait for ticks. I guess it has to register some kind of a tick 0, I guess, before it applies. But then later on, if we put like a C and then like let's make it, you know, 3 again. So it's really obvious that we've turned down the volume. And then let's make this 0. So when it hits this command, it's going to immediately turn the sample down. So, you know, really quiet. I find typically also if you want like a nice middle value to give you a little wiggle room, I like A. A is a nice one. And then of course, if we add a command right here, this is going to be, you know, how long does it wait? And so typically I'll do 8 is usually nice. So to show you how the ticks work, I'm just going to go ahead and use a single command here followed by another command. So we'll start off pretty loud and then we will apply a volume change of 0. So it's going to turn the sample just straight off. And we're going to apply that after, let's say 4. Now let's make it 8. Now let's make it something longer like C. Oh, you know what? C, so it's the number of ticks and C is going to exceed our values here because we get to A is 10, BC. So that's right at 12. And so I think that might actually cause a problem. So if we go for one value less than that, like B, we should be just underneath the number of ticks that we have per beat. And if you want to change that, I forgot where it is. It's like song options, I believe. Song options, ticks per line is at 12. So that value might be causing an issue. So we set it to like B. And there you go. And just to sort of show you how this might work, let's make this 0 and then let's copy these two. Whoops, just these two. And we'll put them down a few times. And now let's go ahead and make all of these B's. Let's make them all 2s. Actually, wait. Let's do it this way. So we're going to copy these. Okay, so that's our first example. And then we're going to go ahead and change these all to like 0s. So this would be like the most extreme we can be afterwards. So this is going to wait, you know, B ticks before it applies the volume change of 0. Where this one's not going to wait. It's just going to turn it off. So over here, right, we have clear gating, but over here, it's not the craziest because B really extends it out. Let's make it something like 8, just because it won't be so extreme on the one end. Anyways, that gives you the idea. So we kind of wait for the volume change to occur. So that's the C command. All right, so with all these commands combined, we can create something akin to the vinyl scratching, right? So this is the way I kind of thought of it. I'm like, okay, cool. So when you move a record and you change it, you're scrolling through the record is kind of how I view it. So it's like the playheads moving through this at some speed. How fast is that speed is determined by the pitch. And I've noticed that when you're going one way, it's not as loud typically as when the turn happens. So when you turn it, that's typically the loudest part. And then, and you're going backwards now. And then the speed might be different on the way back. So you might change that. And that's basically what we're going to be using these commands to try and replicate. So first off, I like to have a column that's just my forwards and backwards column. This is something I sort of developed as I went. So first off, we'll go forwards, and my resolution right now is that lines per beat is at 8. So that means every 4 lines, we have our 8th note. So this is an 8th note. This is an 8th note. Kind of helpful to know. So let's just say I'm going forwards. So we're going forwards here, and then I'm going backwards, and then I'm going forwards, and then I'm going backwards. So this is, that's what we're doing. Cool. Now let's say when I'm going forwards, I want to be going, regular speed. We're going regular speed. But when we're going backwards, we're going pretty fast. So I'm going to put a pitch up command right here, and I'm going to set it pretty high. So we're going backwards pretty fast. And then this should be forwards and this should be backwards. And then right here, we'll turn this off. Okay, so we're going forwards pretty fast here. So now this is what we have. Well, this is going to be the same. So now we're going to go back to our regular speed. So it's going to undo that pitch up command. And this does take some time to do. If you want it to be faster, I found that stacking them can actually make it a bit quicker. But that's where like a higher resolution. I'm not sure if that actually matters or not, but that's besides the point. So that's what we have right now. It's all pretty short. So, and again, this does take some time to transition, which is why it takes as long as it does. We'll go forwards. We'll go F again. So we could just leave it at 0. And then, then we will cut it off right there. So we have a really basic kind of a scratch-like effect. And then right here, maybe halfway through this, we put a forwards command. And we pitch it down to, what the heck. And so I try to imagine like, right, these scratches are where the backs and forths are happening. So to mimic the volume profile, which would be kind of like the last step here, is we'll put in some C commands, and right before and after we'll have a C command. This will be the loudest, and then we'll set these to A. And we will have this apply. Let's apply it 4 or 8 afterwards, because it doesn't like there is a bit of the delay where this happens. So you can experiment with this, and then we'll take this idea. You hold Shift Alt in order to do this kind of copy pasting, by the way. We're going to take this idea and we're going to apply it to the other backwards command. So we'll go up 2, paste it. And now we've got a volume. So now this part is also the loudest where those turns would be taking place. And we could be more extreme with this. We could set this at A, but the second one, maybe we set at like 4, and then we bring it up to A later. And we could do the same thing here and then put this one at A. And in some cases, I actually find it pretty cool because, sometimes they stop. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to put a 0 there, a 0 there. Why not? Let's just say that maybe the record has been stopped and then they pick it up later. This C command will be reached. So this D command will take a place, and it should already be in effect when we hit this. And you get all kinds of scratching rhythms. Now this one, right, is a bit slower. We could be a bit faster, but that is the general technique. And right, we're using this loop. You don't have to use this loop. We could change the loop up. Oh, and of course, every time you change the loop, we got to go back to the sample properties and change this to ping pong to avoid that same issue, which is just, I really wish there was a lock ability. Well, maybe this is it. I don't know. Enable loop is set, loop will exit. I don't know what this is yet. I'll look at that later. So yeah, if anyone knows of a way to lock it, that would be like fantastic. Maybe I could write like a little script or something that would do it for me. And let's go for a different one. Just show you a couple different ones. Oh, this loop's pretty long. This does a pretty good job of changing depending on how long the loop is. Let's change this to ping pong. And then, of course, we could come in, we could add another effects command, Control Shift over, and put in an S, and we could start at some other point in the loop. Like let's just do S4. What the heck? And let's try out a different loop and change that loop property back to ping pong. And maybe we say, well, let's try out, I don't know, 28, right? Because 8's like that halfway point. So maybe there's some interesting happening there. And 0, 0, of course, is the beginning. And the reason you might want to shift a little bit is because at the end of these samples, typically there's like a fill or something. Or a lot of the times there is. And so you might want to move to somewhere more in the middle where it's like you're messing with the body of the sound, which could be a little more useful. But anyways, that's how that works. And then all I did, so let's look at a couple examples over here, and then we'll move to the next way I did it, which is very similar. So you see we've got our pitch up and pitch down, which again is basically like the speed with which this thing is moving. And we've got our volume profiles going along, and we've got our backwards and our forwards. Now, this one was done just after a lot of experimentation. So I'll start out thinking of something like this, and then I'll just start sort of screwing with stuff. Especially when you start tossing in the S command, you'll find yourself just fiddling all over the place. And this was what I settled on. Maybe we go for a different loop. And it's going to have a similar effect, but you know, some loops will have like kick drums, which sound way different when they're reversed, or they have stuff in the middle that's constantly playing. Others will have, you know, gaps, which you might want a record. You might want a sample with more of a gap. Like that's pretty dang cool. So yeah, go ahead, hunt for them. And then whatever you want your main loop to be, like over here, I've got a totally different loop as my main loop. This is just for the scratching. And then when we put them together, and again, we're using the slice command to just pick up this loop at a spot that would kind of make sense for where this is happening. So okay, so if this is a beat, right? 8 lines is a beat. We want 4 of those. So we're not going to go through a whole bar till we're like way down here. So that's why a higher resolution is kind of helpful. You might mess with 16, or you might stick to 4. I found 4 just to be way too small. 16 presents its own challenges because if you do 16 lines per beat, this beat sync thing will then begin to argue with you because it can only go up to 512. I don't know how difficult it would be to make this bigger, but it'd be really nice if at higher lines per beat settings, this would also go higher. Maybe it's like a CPU thing. I don't know. But yeah, this will cap out, and you'll find out if you start messing with it that you'll run into that issue. There is a way around it. You can use phrases and set an independent lines per beat for the phrase and mess with it that way. But I don't recall if this fixes this issue. It'll calculate it with a different one, but now you have to start working with phrases, and I have not done the most with phrases. But that might be a avenue you could look at. Okay, anyways, there's all the stuff you need to know about like it. You're like 99% of the way there now. For our next sample, wow, that sounded weird. For our next one, did not mean to do that. We have this lovely thing. So this one, again, similar thing, only this time, instead of having a separate row for them, I have it's all just one sample being played. It's this one. And when it does play, well, this one is essentially as if it has an S00 command. But over here, I move to different scratch positions, and then I use an S command to set it to somewhere I think would be reasonable. And that's pretty much it. Same exact thing. You see here use of the double column strat. And I do move values around a little bit in the middle because you want to get those different speed changes. So if we like put in like let's start off without these, right? So actually we kind of need oh, well, that one's defined. But we could lose those. And that's what we have. If we made these all F, that's what you get. So it's just kind of like little nuance things. If you're messing with something that's sort of pitch sensitive, might be more important. Also notice over here, there's a third column. So I'm really going nuts with this first one. And this is where you definitely want loop setting on because this might make it move so fast if your sample's not long. It might just go woo, just, fly off the end of the the sample. And so if you don't have a ping pong on, it's not gonna jam with you. And that's basically how these work. There's another one down here. And this one, I take advantage of more of the gating. So you see 0.8. So there's some gating effects going on. 0.2 is a little bit sharper and a slice effect. But again, same principles. And then finally, this one is the most different. Whoops, I need my keyword focus over here. All right, for our last example here, things are a bit different because here we've got a sample that has been chopped up into pieces like so. And then we are triggering a groove by like sequencing one. And then we're doing the same techniques here, but now it's per sample. So every time we hit like one of these, like a new slice, it's going to forget all this other stuff up here because it's a different slice, doesn't apply to it. So as a result, we're going to get a totally different result. Now, I want you to really understand how the S command works here too, because you might try and make use of that, and it works way different. So let's say that I've got some new sample I load up, some new loop. So here's my loop. I'm going to use this loop, and I go ahead and go in, I auto slice it, and here we go. We've got our auto slice loop, and it creates all these samples right here. So first thing to note is we're going to have the same problem that when it reaches the end, it might just stop. And you might not want that. In this case, it's really something you may or may not want on. So I'm going to select them all though, and I'm just going to change them all to ping pong. So they will loop back and forth. That last one looked kind of pointless, but that's what we have here. And let me go ahead and first let's get rid of several of these loops just because I want to show you how the slice command works. So, okay, let's say that we hit slice 0.2. So we put down slice, which I believe is this one. Yeah. So if we put down slice, you might expect it to work like on the whole sample. It's only true if you trigger the root one, which is this guy right here. The very first one contains the whole enchilada. If we play it, you see it goes through them all. But if we play the next one, it's doing that ping pong because that's what we set for all the slices. Now, if we put a slice here on this second sample and we tell it to start at 0.0, notice that it starts at the beginning of the slice itself. And if we put a slice here and we put it at 0.8, it's going to start, or not 0.8, we'll put 0, we'll put 8.0. It should start there in the middle. And it does. So when we look at this example and you see slice commands, it's as if we're dealing with a bunch of like little samples within itself. That's basically what it is, what this is. And yeah, so if you try to use a slice command, you're going to have to use the root file if you'd like to use that to skip around and mix and match them in. I found it kind of just like easier on my brain if I had a whole separate column for it, but you could do it that way. So anyways, over here, we've got our sequenced groove. We're again going backwards and we have pitch ups and pitch downs, but they are, I don't need to be as matching as far as going up and down by the same amount in order for my sanity to stay intact, because every time I click a new sample, it's going to do that. So it's as if you're just scratching this one sample. So, right, we have some forwards and some backwards, but there's also the ping pong. So if we come into this group of samples, they all have ping pong turned on. If I turn it off, this is what it will sound like. So you still get some of that scratching, but you might like that more. It's basically like a tighter volume profile. It's like there's more gating. So it's as if we were more aggressive with the C command and had C zeros everywhere. Because when it reaches the end on those backwards commands, it just hits the end and doesn't do anything. You could, of course, set it to forward and get some cool stutter effects. Backwards will give you a lot more of that with drums at least. And then I found that ping pong sounds kind of cool. It's got like that whooshy kind of a sound. And that's got the back and forth, which is kind of how I imagine. It's like they're going, was real crazy, man. If we could put the gate command, this is where you might look at working at a higher resolution so you could like gate it back and forth really fast. I mean, you could do some cool stuff there. But anyways, that's besides the point. So that's basically how the scratching works, and some considerations you want to look at if you're going to do it this way. And I just did the first little bit just because I was kind of curious, what kind of results this would push. So there are a bunch of different options. If I had to recommend one to start with, I'd probably recommend you mess around with this one and separate out the commands, because then you can look at just scratching. You can look at just creating different rhythms and effects. But that is how you will create a scratching effect inside of Renoise. If you have any questions about this, feel free to let me know. If you have any important points or information that I missed or even got wrong, please correct me in the comments. I'm here to learn just as much as I am to teach. Subscribe and have a blessed day.